from tech and art spaces to talk about this topic. And let's first introduce Professor Shi. He's a professor at Nanjing University. And maybe you can just introduce yourself if that's better. Let's welcome him.
Can you put on the PowerPoint? Okay. I might just use Mandarin from time to time, because I suppose people might understand. 我中文名字叫石可，是working for Nanjing University, and I'm coming from theater background, doing both theatrical practice, performance, contemporary performance, and related theories. So that's my background. Today's topic is, as you say, John Jarrett and Stellag. On the schedule, I just said, sorry, I'm gonna time it myself. On the schedule, it said John Jarrett's work and what's behind the ideal of decentralization. But later, I found might be Stellag's case might be the better example. So that's today. So the first bunch of images I would like to show you here is from John Jarrett. It's called Western Flag. It is in Texas, 2017. At the site of a very first oil gusher on this planet, he set up an installation of famed pole emitting a flag of black smoke. It's pretty much straightforward, a haunting monument to the carbon economy. The sculpture here is the smoke itself, a perpetually toxic entity, and you can see. But that's all deserted. And later on, he basically scanned. I'm gonna explain why it is, it's not really scanned into the computer system. He scanned the installation as 3D models, recreate the site in the virtual world, and let the 3D version of the installation remain in the virtual world as the virtual double of the reality. Then he exhibited the digital version on tour, so you can see in reality what it actually is. The artworks is this so-called, you couldn't really name it. It's not video. It's not, it's, let's say, new media work. But anyway, John Jarrett named his work of this kind of digital sculpture, digital sculpture. Another work I would like to show you guys is Solar Reserve. That's 2014. So this is the real thing. That's the digital sculpture of it. It's not the traditional, conventional relationship as representation, as we say, and methods, but basically, they rebuilt a virtual version of a solar thermal power plant in Nevada. This virtual bird-eye view of the plant operates in real time. It is 10,000 mirrors glittering as they track a simulated sun. It is a monument of renewable energy, but also a silent spectacle. Next one. Exercise in Djibouti, a bunch of soldiers doing a drill, and soul farm, a pig farm, automated pig farm, explore the enormity of modern systems. The former depict a group of soldiers performing endless, grueling drills in desolate landscape, while the later present an automated pig farm operating without human presence. These are the sculpture tableau of immense scale and impact, criticizing the dehumanizing and environmentally devastating logic of globalized industry and warfare. If we neglect the aspect of the content or political message, the works stand out temporarily and quite obviously. Digital sculpture represents a profound and sophisticated evolution in the realm of contemporary art. It pretty much, if you know a bit about art history or art theory. It's quite a revolutionary setting in terms of ontological definition of visual art, not merely in the sense that it used digital tools, but more importantly, treat the virtual space as the very primary medium for constructing sculpture objects and the environments with their own physical and temporal driven simulations that exist as a persistent digital entities. The core of his sculpture practice lies in his scan. It's just taking 1,000 photographs, then capture thousands of images of the real-world objects. Then this data is used to construct hyper-detailed 3D models. However, these models are not pre-rendered into a linear video, as we commonly say. Instead, they are placed within a game engine. In a game engine, then a virtual universe governed by its own rules. This is the crucial distinction. Each piece is a live simulation. So basically, the later version of the real thing just running themselves in the virtual world, kind of in a parallel universe in a way. So generally, the choice of subject matter elevated this technical innovation into a powerful political and ecological commentary. His work often functions as a portrait of systems of energy, labor, and data. In a way, by digital sculpture, John Jarrett has forged a new artistic category. In a way, he used the game engine not for play, but as a studio, crafting objects and environments that possess mass, volume, light, and most importantly, their own independent time. Next one. Yeah. So basically, these are all being put into the game engine and doing their own logic. But this one, sorry. This one is not. This one's only photograph using drone, because that's Google's database server. And Google refused to work with them because that's their secret. But my own perspective, this is the most important one, because that's just reveal our contemporary myth that we are living in a virtual world. As the Professor Wen talked about this morning, those are the most energy-consuming sectors in our society. But their image is they are virtual, right? So the second case I would like to share is Australian artist Stella. Quite a long time ago, actually, this is called Pin Body, 1996. That's 30 years ago. But the central concept of this work is subversion of body's agency. Traditionally, the body acts based on signal from its own brain. Now we work in this way as human beings. My brain tell my limb, and my nervous system tell me to speak or whatever. But this one replaced the internal common center with an external decentralized network. So what happened is a computer measured the ping rate. The signal is, ping. That's a really Asian word. Signal was sent via the internet. In 1996, that's quite primitive, but they send signals in, and all these reads, this response time between the word sending and the ping rates and the matter of latency. So high traffic of low connections resulting in high ping times. This data served as a raw, unpredictable input for the system. So the stream of ping data was then mapped to a custom-built, computer-controlled muscle stimulating system. So if you don't know, it's just doing like a common weird contemporary dance, like but actually it's compulsory. It's being forced by our collective subjectivity, so to speak. So that's quite profound. I think that's the most precise image of the human condition of this time I have ever seen in terms of art making. Anyway, so the system of ping data was then mapped into this system. Finally, the real result was that Stellac's body was involuntarily activated by this global data flow. A spike in ping rate from a server in Tokyo might cause a select jerk, and so on and so on. The operational principle of ping body was a deliberate subversion of body's biological hierarchy. In a normal voluntary act, a brain sends signals to the muscles. Stellak bypassed the internal command center entirely. His body became a physical, involuntary semi-graph for the ephemeral flows of digital information. So this is two examples I would like to share with people here. But actually, let me get back to another field or domain that quite different to people in this conference, in this context, which is tech or computer-based arts. Let's talk about this desire of breaking down of the subjectivity. So, say in a common word, in our daily language is the redefinition of what is insane and insane. And how do we define, are you mad or what? I mean, you're an artist, you must be mad. That's quite philosophical statements though, actually. So the dissolve of subjectivity is actually the one of the major philosophical investigation in the last century, I would say, especially for the French thinkers. They exert quite huge influences on our society currently. I'm talking about people like Derrida, people like Foucault, people like Lacan, people, the names, we know their theory quite well, actually. So basically, they're talking about the shattering of subjectivity, inspired by this artist called Antoine Artaud, which he proposed quite a weird idea that I'm not mad, but I'm my own father, I'm my own daughter, and his writing is really inspiring, meanwhile crazy. So that's the one source, or the prototype of decentralizing in philosophical terms, I would like to say. If the I is just me, ego, from Descartes, from the invention of the modern subjectivity, scientific self, we Asian being influenced by European thinkers. I mean, that goes without saying. I mean, there's a base of individualism. If I was not a fixed definition, a originator of actions and words, how we assign, blame, or praise anything, any actions. I think this is one of the historical genes of currently thoughts of decentralization in quite many aspects in society. I don't think I need to repeat what Derrida or Foucault or Lacan's theory. We know all about this in a way that they, for example, Foucault is talking about the power of knowledge. Derrida talking about there's no present, there's no fixed knowledge as present. Everything is differential. And the Lacan, we constitute our sense of sensibility via the mirror image. We doing this psychoanalytical negotiation with others all the time. So I think that's the first element of current thinking of decentralization. But let's talk about these people. I mean, they all look like quite. Anyway, this guy. But before this, I would like to say something about the sense of centralization. So basically, you get two types of decentralization. One is fiscal, the other is apparently about governance, about power structure. That's most behind this. The question is really a stupid question, though. Why so many Eastern European region kids really into this kind of thinking? I think that's the kind of cultural tradition. If we're talking about, it's really weird that not really many people talk about anarchism anymore. But those are used to be the big ideas and the really popular ideas once. I mean, you can basically, 1900 mapped those ideas of traditional anarchism to the currently rhetorics and utterance and discourse in the decentralization in the Bitcoin world or blockchain. Decentralization as idea of how do we deal with the authority? How do we deal with difficulties brought out by the class system? All this left, the difficulties left movement trying to solve, but actually failed in the last century, and failed by the capitalism's ideas as well. So anarchism. I don't think I need to repeat all the ideas of anarchism. It's basically anyway. Right, the one page log. No. Oh, okay, I made it wrong. So this is the figures. Bakunin, Proudhon, Kropotkin, and if any Mandarin speaker will know this figure, Bajing. His name coming from Bakunin and Kropotkin. And when he was young, he's an anarchist, really. So traditional anarchism and the third way, they are aiming for, of course, social freedom based on individualism, based on the idea of a good society. But freedom has two aspects, of two faces, right? So, what distinguishes our traditional anarchism and communism is the emphasis on the individual and the social freedom. But the anarchists believe the individual liberty is inseparable from the social equality. A person cannot be truly free in a society driven by class divisions and economic coercion. The idea of freedom is different to both classical Marxism, which address a major on the concept of negative liberty, which is the freedom from interference, as Isaiah Berlin defined, but per operation. Right. And the next thing I would like to say is from this bunch of thinkers, we kind of we get into those people. We got into those people. Of course, that's the fiction depict, of the people we know, right? Zuckerberg, Musk, all those people, so-called Silicon liberalism or so-called neoliberalism being criticized harshly in the last 10 years or 20 years by people from my context. But why? Why? Because I mean, if you look into the stories they're making for the society, you would say pretty much similar similarities between their goals in terms of social equality with the anarchists. It's quite funny, but they are not, they don't mind getting to the stock market though. And So it creates a really funny contradictory that let's decentralize, let's fuck the authority, but let me make the decision. It's another old story of left movement who's leading the change. Anyway, I'm related to this because if we're talking about decentralization in Web3, which I have really limited knowledge into, but if I look into from my perspective, if I look into all this repeatedly narrative, I found affinities. I found these similarities in terms of thinking style, and I found a certain sense of guilty mind, in a way. So the way I say this is about, all above discourses, this bunch of people, of course. If they are the VIP customers of Bitcoin, right? And this bunch of people, I mean, from my discipline is called a guy called Richard Schechner. He invents a theory called restored behavior. What is restored behavior? There's no new things under the sunshine. There's no. So all about discourse are transferred into the symbolic structure of the utterance of the Web3. The doom, the naive, and the sincere idealism now has been translated into the language of tech terms of bitcoins and blockchains and the mathematic language, linguistic devices, as if the sheer procedure of recording itself, the very word virtue, would guarantee it miraculously rid of the difficulties of human failure. The idea of decentralization behind Web3 thus is, in Richard Schechner's sense, a restored behavior. It's a dialect dynamics. We try to reinvent, but we step yet another again into the old stories. So as a collection of social performance, a performative reenactment of the old ghost of anarchism, communism, and the very invisible hand. If we do want a system healthy enough without a huge ethical black hole, if we don't want this, we still need regulations, though, right? But as Professor Wen this morning said, the data is just way too messy to do this. I mean, but they are chanting about unbreakable crypto being, get rid of all regulation. It's a myth, of course. So if we do want a really healthy enough without a huge ethical black hole, then we might want to conduct a historical investigation on the biological development of these ideological ancestors. So back to the two artists mentioned earlier, John Jarrett's work reveals the hidden center pretending not to exist, reveal that the virtue actually has a rather heavy and energy-consuming infrastructure. The relationship between the digital sculpture and its arranging is not presentation or even simulacra. It is the actualized parallel universe as the performative possibility as the reality. Meanwhile, Pinbody, demonstrating actualized parallel, demonstrate the dynamic of a collective volition in its blind libido and drives we call internet. Internet is simultaneously a communication tool and a global external nervous system. Decentered or not, our body was plugged into the external network all the time with all types of visible and invisible force shaping our experience and our behavior without our knowing. It's not even in the old psychoanalytical way, and it is almost impossible to unplug. It's almost a cliche nowadays to say we couldn't unplug. I mean, we got panic if we don't have Wi-Fi signals. I mean, at least I do. But anyway, which is the true way of decentralization in the current context? So as Derrida, the Foucault, if we put the pin body as a work forcibly in Derrida's thought, pin body forcefully questioned the very notion of human agency, individuality, and subjectivity as we used to know it. Now we are in this post-human state, so-called, where the body's boundary and permeable are porous, and its action can be remotely controlled by decent non-human intelligence. What is point to keep a static self holding a highly cryptic Bitcoin account or unerasable trace of our deeds? If the idea of self being. What exactly behind anxiety to claim our body is obsolete? That's the very idea of Stelak's work. Why he's doing this is that our body is obsolete. So if Stelak's performance was a direct manifestation of long-standing philosophy that the human body is a biological inadequate and so-called, it's the signal, it's the sign, it's signal of our human failure, right? The body is not a sovereign entity, but an extended physical accurator of a technological system. If the movements are no longer expressions of conscious but a symptom of network traffic, the grotesque feature of this work is well-known example of the absurdity instead of the evidence of its correctness. So say is the true decentralization we experience is actually not about power or governance, but about the sense, rethinking about the sense of selves, leave us, about, how do we deal with the system, because we kind of being forced into this obligation, try to reinvent the system all the time. I'm sorry to do this old-fashioned reading from papers because it's using the second language. But I think if I may rephrase the whole thing, as I said, this is the depiction of our situation now. I mean, you can keep a positive view, you can keep a negative view. Doesn't matter. And I think the second point is if we, of course, we need to look into Web3 or whatever this new inventions, this new omnipresence devices of our age in the terms we are using now, computer terms, because it was and it is established in this way. But I would propose to look into, well, again, into the sort of this guy, of these people, of these people, and have a look and think why the contradiction of that time being repeated this time. So I think that's what I want to share with the audience today, and thank you very much.
Okay, let's proceed to the second sharing. But this is kind of different. So it's going to be two people. Oh, well, it's going to be a panel discussion. It's kind of different. It's going to be me moderating the discussion with two of the speakers today. One is Scott Moore, who is the founder of Public Works, and then also Barry Thru, who is the director of Gray Area, which is an art gallery in San Francisco. let's welcome them on board. On the stage. Well, per their, per their request, I use Nano Banana Pro to generate this slides for them.
We're using the latest AI.
Oh yeah, latest AI.
Good.
Just published a few days ago, and then they want it to be epic and then dramatic. So there you go.
I think you said make it dramatic four times over.
Well, he said that, but
dramatic.
I did it 8 times.
That's
so,
good.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Feedback loop.
That's important. Yeah.
Okay.
Glad we got there.
So okay. Okay, I just very old-fashioned paper. Can you just tell us your title? Because the title, the title of their sharing is Cathedral and the Silicon Souls. But I'm super interested, why did you pick this title? And then what does Cathedral here stand for? Do anyone of you guys want to?
Yeah.
Well, sure. Yeah. First, I'll just say that it's great to be here. Our comments tonight are sort of departing from an article that we published together in a publication called Palladium, which is sort of a governance publication in San Francisco called Cathedrals in the Silicon Soul. And we were trying to, I guess we didn't get it's fine, we didn't get a QR up there, but you can search for that and kind of read it later. So that's kind of what we're basing this off of, and the general argument is that we need these new sorts of institutions, and we use the metaphor of the cathedral as the place to jump off from. And I think it's important to say that the cathedral in this case doesn't necessarily have much to do with Christianity in the metaphor. It's more of, there are a few things that go into this notion of the cathedral. One of them is that they're big capital investments, to make this sort of grandiose or very long-lasting sort of institution that embodies certain values, beliefs, and sort of cultural aesthetics in the nature of the institution. Another thing to it is that the return on investment that you get for this capital expenditure is social and it's spiritual. It's not necessarily revenue-based, and so you're investing in something that has a different sort of return on the investment than normal market-based things often take into account, even with R&D. And the other thing to it is that these institutions just aren't grandiose and aesthetic in the sense of being awe-inspiring, but the stuff that goes on inside them serves to sort of reconfigure social relations in various ways. And so there's other things that go inside in one of these spaces that we're using and identifying as something perhaps lacking in the technological culture, particularly happening in the Bay Area right now.
Yeah, I would maybe add, in that context of what's happening in the Bay, there's a lot of challenges right now with the telos of why people are building technology. People love to build AI, people love to build new tools, but people don't really know why they're building them. So I think this is really harkening back to an era where, whether it was correct or not in the context of that particular case, people understood why they were building the cathedrals of the 1500s, 1400s. People understood why they were building new kinds of cultural institutions even in the 1960s when Billy Kluver was doing art and technology for Bell Labs. And I think that has changed in a way that was kind of reflected in the previous talk, actually. I think very fitting that there's a discussion kind of on the historical notions of whether it's anarchism or kind of social cultural context that led us to this point. But I feel like it's missing now, and I think that's what kind of spurred us to write the piece. But to answer your question on just our kind of backgrounds too, because I think you were also kind of asking who are we? What are we doing here? I just joined the board of Gray Area, which Barry's been running for a long time, and it's been a kind of preeminent institution in San Francisco for a long time. And my background is mostly actually previously being in technology. So I worked on a lot of open source technologies, ran a company that funded a lot of open source developers, funded about $100 million in open source software, And we basically have been trying to figure out, like, why is it that these different kinds of maintenance projects or different artistic and kind of more creative projects are not valued the same way as something that has an immediate ROI or an immediate capital return. And I think the previous talk maybe describes partly culturally why or what that change has been in an interesting way. But I'd love for you to describe a bit more about Gray Area as well and your background.
Sure. Gray Area, we just turned 18 years old this year. We're a organization in the Bay Area, and we're really doing a couple of things. We kind of role play as an arts organization, but we're really thinking about technology in a deep way as sort of cultural ramifications. And so we're both, we exist to support artwork that historically and still largely today doesn't find easy support within traditional sorts of institutions, whether that be museums or other sorts of cultural spaces or more community-based arts organizations. And so we're supporting artists that use technology to create new forms of art that can better comment on the sort of current cultural contexts. And we're also teaching artists how to have the agency to shape the conversations around technology and its development through the practice of their work. And so we do that through a few ways. We do public events. So we have a large space in San Francisco, a sort of black box theater space, where we do exhibitions and performances and things like that, audiovisual, immersive events. We have education programs, and so we teach technology skills through the production of creative work, and also some things like media literacy, media theory, that kind of thing. And then we have an incubator that's more about project development, where we can take projects that artists have identified and put more professional support, funding opportunities and things around them. And so we're doing that all. We're doing it in San Francisco because we think it's the only place, besides maybe Shenzhen, I think, that it would make sense to do something that's really focused on these really interlabor relations, like in the, identified in the conference. So we're really talking about all these conditions and communities around the development of this technology.
Okay, thank you so much for the brief introduction, I guess. But I mean, you two have observed a lot of like trendy new inventions in Silicon Valley, not just now, because you guys been there forever, like not just including like the rise of social media, the rise of maybe crypto or blockchain. So what have you observed? And you mentioned that there's a problem in Silicon Valley. So what kind of problem is now? Well, so you mentioned that people don't really know what they're building or why. They just know how to optimize it. But was it the same thing happen like maybe 20 or 40 years ago when like personal computer was invented, when internet was invented, or it's just something different now?
I definitely want to hear the longer term answer on that, like in terms of the whole history of the Bay. Because for me, like I really spent, from 2018 onwards a good amount of time, 2017 onwards a good amount of time there. And I grew up in Canada, which is like not that far from the States, but it's different still culturally in some ways. But I think the biggest thing that I've noticed in the last probably 5 years really is a huge amount of focus goes into engagement and into metrics kind of chasing versus into actual production and creative output. Lots of people make things. They're makers, but they don't have a good reason why they're making them. Sometimes that's fine. They want to make something fun. They want to be part of a hackathon. They want to be part of a community. But I think often you want people to have a really strong reason and motivation for the reason they care about something. And I think sometimes people get really ahead of themselves in trying to put something out there into the world because it gets them notoriety or it gets them some kind of like nexus. And I think that's been especially true with founder culture in Silicon Valley now, because everyone wants to be a founder. It used to be really uncool to be a founder. Like people being founders, like were like ostracized from like most of reasonable society, and people were like, you should, you know, like everyone's parents were mad at them for being founders. Like no one was like happy about the fact that you decided to go and, you know, try and start like a Web 1, you know, maybe even like pets.com. And so I think that like that change now, it's become too cool. It's become too sexy in a way to be that. And I think actually we should make it less cool maybe. And that's like, not to say people shouldn't do it, because I actually think that we'll maybe talk about this, but there's an opposite problem in, at least I live in Singapore now, and I think in Asia, it's much less common for people to become founders. I think people have like a more reluctance to become founders. So certainly this is like locally, culturally dependent, but I think that's a big shift I've noticed in the last few years being in San Francisco as well, is that no one wants to really think deeply about, not no one, I mean, again, it's I'm being a little bit biased, but a lot of people are not thinking deeply about what they're building.
Yeah, so there's a, you know, I think it's worth stepping back and thinking a little bit about like why did this technology kind of like miracle happen in San Francisco as opposed to other places? And it's like not because there's nice weather, really. It's like there were other conditions in place, and those were largely cultural conditions out of the 60s and 70s that created this sort of creative technology milieu there. And it really was, you know, originally more of a aspirational or vision-based kind of like technology world. And of course, and San Francisco, the Bay Area, changes all the time. And so it goes through these waves of different things. But I can say I've been there for 22 years, and I've known people, you know, from the 80s and before that have been working on this problem of how to get the area to think a little bit more intentionally about this culture and technology relationship. And it's never really addressed it either on a civic or kind of corporate level in a serious way, although there are some examples of that with like company artist and residency programs that we could talk about and other sorts of things. But in aggregate, while there are many things that have gone on, like there's an institution called the Exploratorium in San Francisco that's sort of a science and perception museum. And their opening inaugural exhibition was a thing called Cybernetic Serendipity, which was one of the first art and technology science kind of exhibitions, and it was, you know, it opened there. And there has been a lot of sort of more underground creative technology work, but it's never been sort of valorized or focused on as San Francisco has never viewed itself as a major cultural city, and the companies that are built out of this sort of creative soup there, if they want to do cultural activities, will often export them to New York or London or something like that, because those are the places where culture is done, and San Francisco is a place where the building is done, you know. And so that, I'm sorry?
What about counterculture?
And counterculture is another thing there. So there is a countercultural thread there too, and you can see this through. There's a whole lot of points on this, from like Black Panthers and like Whole Earth Catalog all the way up. Too much to talk about right now, but it is an interesting question to say, what does a 21st century countercultural, technically literate kind of institution or organization or movement look like? And it's one of the things we think a little bit about at Gray Area, but I think it's a larger question of like, how does that grow or foment?
But do you guys think like San Francisco in general is building technologies for people, or do they even care about people, or they're building technologies, sorry, but it might be harsh, but are they just building technologies to serve the capital, to serve like people don't really need these like technologies?
I think this is kind of the interlabor discussion, right? Like, I mean, we have technologies now that are not particularly like, there's a thinker, Ivan Illich, who like was contemporary with McLuhan, also Catholic Christian, funny enough, given the context of the cathedral, but like he was very adamant that we should be building technologies that are convivial, which he meant, you know, technologies where people are interacting with each other, where they're kind of in service of getting people into community, getting people to care about each other. And I think the interlabor conversation and framing is interesting because we're really not interacting with each other. We're kind of like interacting with ghosts, really. Like we're interacting with this kind of history of the internet. I mean, even when we're interacting online and social media, arguably with that internet theory, we're interacting with like bots. We're not really interacting with each other. And I think there's some place where that broke down. I think probably around like the social media era, where like the goal was no longer to like, because the business model required it, to like get people to actually connect. Or with like even dating apps, like, like the goal is like people have to keep using apps. So like why would they want anyone to connect with each other? And I think that ends up being a feature in terms of company profits, but bad in terms of long-term societal outcomes. And we don't really have a course correction mechanism for that. So in a world where, like, not specifically in San Francisco, but just generally things are becoming shorter and shorter term in terms of capital cycles and in terms of like interest in trying to build for growth in some abstract sense, I think it's very hard to escape from that. So I would actually maybe defend San Francisco in some sense, which is like to say, I don't think San Francisco is actually a place where this is more true. It's just that the cycles of acceleration and compounding happen faster. And so it is further ahead on this cycle, which is one that I think will naturally occur in other places if they're not careful about how they actually approach that sort of question of separating out like societal value and cultural value, and or rather reintegrating those into flows of capital and how we perceive capital value.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think one of the big points, you asked like, do they want this? And so that's there's a lot in that they, right? But I think the major point, well, I think it's that, I think people generally, I think there are very few people that are generally out there like doing bad intentionally, right? I mean, at least there's some sort of like conceptualization around what they're up to, and they generally want to do things that they believe are building the kind of world building in the way they want to live in or something. But why would it be otherwise? But I think the major point, particularly around this interlabor, is that folks are constrained by market and social conditions, which cause the things that they do to be directed in a certain way that are somewhat it's conditioned out of their control, or at least strongly influenced. And so I think that, this is one of the ways that I think, maybe we'll get to art here in a second and why we've kind of talked about it, but I think one of the big arguments in our article was just that we need these other sorts of meaning-building institutions as sort of a countervailing force against these sort of pressures that have their own sort of motivations and ends beyond what any of the people actually building this stuff can sort of dictate.
I mean, like back in days, like back in 1960s or 70s, people can still like build stuff for themselves or for a community. Like, because like we did a documentary on common culture in San Francisco and the personal computer. People build personal computer because they felt they need this like a new personal thing that they can own to better improve their life. But I mean, at that time, you can build a computer just for making music. But I feel like now, even though we have AI, we have like blockchains, Web3, these things are moving away from us. Like, cause like as we previous speeches mentioned, these like transactions are just serving as some edges between two addresses, between two nodes. We literally just became nodes, and then we use some like a natural language to generate tokens, not any so-called meaningful stuff. Is it like really? Do you think this is like something new, or back in days we're also inventing the same thing? Sorry.
I like that you use the term personal computer. Like, I think that's a great indicator of where culture was and is, like, in a sense, like a personal computer, it's like yours, it's like your computer, you're like interacting with this thing, and like it is very like much just like individually like in this kind of vacuum from everything else. And I think we view technology that way a lot, like where like it's just something that we are using, wielding, and everything external to the relation between us and the screen is irrelevant. And you see that with like, you know, the rise of how people interact on social media, et cetera, et cetera. People have talked about this. But like, I think specifically one of the problems that has arisen there is like, I think there was a time where, and I don't know how strongly I believe this, but like I do think that like there was a time where individualism was still tied into your role in a community and in a culture. And so you had, you know, your neighborhood you were in, you had your, you know, maybe the church you're part of, just to keep on theme. You had all these things that you were kind of like connected with. And I think you don't really see that in North America as much anymore. I do think you see that in Asia. And I do think actually that's like maybe an argument for like why maybe some of the processes and social structures in Asia work better, especially, you know, there's a common saying in China of like planning for 100 years. I think that's like missing in North American culture to some degree. And there's nothing wrong with having a sense of self and a sense of identity and a sense of who you are. I think that's very important, and it's a part of self-discovery. But it's also important to have a sense of where you are in a community. And I think that for whatever reason, that's kind of being abstracted. I would argue, like my argument would be that like it's intentionally being abstracted because it's not very conducive to the market if you're suddenly focused on like trying to do things, you know, without like a focus on your job. And so just keeping people kind of in a box is a lot easier and gets you to, you know, gets the number to go up a lot faster.
Yeah, I think there was there's a book by a communications professor named Fred Turner called The Democratic Surround, which is worth flipping through. But one of the, I don't have time to recreate the whole argument from the book, but one of the things was just how concerned, and this is obviously from a very United States context, but how concerned thinkers in the United States were at the beginning of World War II about particularly the communication technology of radio and how that was going to structure social relations. And the idea is that radio is a one-to-many communication technology. And the idea from like anthropologists like, you know, it's like Margaret Mead, Gregory Bateson, cyberneticists like Norbert Wiener, folks in that space, the thinking was that this one-to-many communication would structure kind of a more fascist society. And so they were thinking very deeply about, and this ladders all the way up into the internet, but, you know, instead of, for the project of creating a democratic individual, people needed to be presented with a curated set of choices and then sort of weave their own narratives through these things. And that was kind of part of the post-war democracy project. What you've seen, which I think is interesting, is as we got to the point of algorithms that were sort of taking the individuality out of our decisions, you know, the data surveillance, all this sort of stuff, as our interfaces to these machines, and I think this is also true with, you know, AI to a certain degree, became more opaque. You also saw this sort of resurgence of fascism in the political sphere. And so I think there's a interesting kind of like, I don't know if it's a cause, it's hard to tell where cause and effect is between these things, but there is something to tell about how media technologies transform into the social and political, which I think is like overlooked right now in how we're building things.
Okay, so I think we are short in time, so maybe last question then. So I heard a lot of like, you know, problems apparently in San Francisco. And then also within the system that we're interacting every day, we're on social media, but we don't really talk to each other anymore. So, but a cathedral or a public space was supposed to have people gather together to talk to each other, to care about each other. Do we really need a new cathedral? Because like in your article you mentioned these cathedrals are just like offices in those buildings. But do we really need a new cathedral that's built so that shared knowledge or shared world, shared interior, shared purpose can be rebuilt inside of it?
Yes, I think.
And how?
I think so. The thing in the article we mentioned was, a lot of the spaces that we gather now are like offices. A lot of the spaces that we see other people that are not just like we're going over to someone's house, we're going to a bar, are like in that context. And even a bar, although it is a social environment, it's also a commercial environment. It's not like you're there to just like hang out and that you can just like do that on any given day, any time of the week, in the way that you might want to in a place like a cathedral or in a place like a community center. And I think that's much more common to find in Asia, I think, than in North America now, is something that is that sort of third space. The problem with an office in this way, beyond what I was saying before, is just like, and this kind of comes up in the article, is like the aesthetics of an office are like extremely, like almost violent. Like there's like very bright fluorescent light, mostly tools to be more productive. Otherwise, kind of like, spaces that are segmented off in terms of function. And, still people expect something that's like more transcendent to happen there, and it's just very hard for that to happen in that environment. So I think if you want creativity, you have to create spaces where people can be creative together. And those can be online too, like people, like, the reason, there's also a huge argument right now, and like Bogna talks a bit about this and others talk about this, where like, Yancey talks about this, like there's a resurgence of people leaving social media and going to group chats, going to other like more quote unquote like private online spaces, because no one wants to deal with like these large feeds or these large groups, instead of just having like a small kind of chat. And I think there's a similar reason for that. It's just like a less kind of oppressive space. It feels less stressful to be in those. And I think the need for, I think clearly, like if you just look at not even just the 1960s, 70s, et cetera, in Silicon Valley, but also in like the context of like where there's been, the Renaissance is classically given as an example, and like the Medici's kind of just bankrolled that, and that went pretty well, I think. I mean, I think we would say it's like, all right. There's not really a lot of examples of that happening now. And so I think our argument for new cathedrals is just like, even though you can't put like a pure KPI on like how many creative projects are you going to get, how many dollars are those going to bring in, like how many people are going to rate that was a 10 out of 10 experience. Like I think you still have to try. And there's a lot of historical examples that suggest that if we do try in that way, the results can be, not just like these stepwise kind of incremental innovations, but like, huge shifts in the way like our society functions, invention, right? Like a sort of new kind of like, you get these massive kind of like S curves that emerge from those environments.
Yeah, and I think, one of the points to make is that the purpose of the cathedral in this metaphor is to support a certain type of activity and outcomes. It's not just kind of the space, like let's build this thing or whatever. And one of the big points of our argument is the need for artists in this whole conversation, which we could talk another hour about. But I'll just say that, artists within this context where AI is creating a new kind of medium, we need this sort of work that can, again, in this inner labor sense, kind of reveal the conditions that are happening in the new kind of medium that everybody's working in. And artists have a place in that. Marshall McLuhan had a concept of artists as being, or art as being sort of an anti-environment. Not anti in the sense of being opposed necessarily, but just a kind of way to talk about and reveal the underlying conditions of what was happening in an immediate environment, and making sure we have art that's not just expression and consumption, but is about sort of feedback, perception, and awareness. And artists are the people that are specifically attuned towards revealing these sorts of things. And so really we're making an argument for this sort of cultural capital expenditure that can support these sort of folks in a space that's about building meaning and not just driven by sort of market forces. And there's a whole economic thing to say about how, in the US particularly, how artists are supported. You know, I'll just read this brief thing from Stellark, since we just had him out at Gray Area for our in September. And he talked he gave a presentation there where he talked a lot about artists building contingent and contestable futures. And so, you know, this is possibilities that can be performed, interrogated, evaluated, but most likely discarded. And he makes the point that, like, futures are not of necessity, but of contingency. And so it's not a future if the future is expected. So I think the degree, you know, there's a lot to say about AI models and how they are, by necessity, sort of impoverished or incomplete models of reality. But the idea that we're going to have predictive models that can just, like, we don't have a future anymore because everything's figured out already, there's no contingency, there's nothing to decide, doesn't make any sense, right? It's like, that's not going to be possible. But we do need this sort of art and creativity in that conversation to explore what these different futures are, and to sort of collapse that parallax between the modeled and reality. It's kind of this, they're reality aligners in some way. And so that's kind of the purpose of that in the conversation.
Okay, thank you so much. I think the time is up, and this is a perfect ending. And okay. We'll be taking questions. Do you guys want to ask any questions? If not, we'll probably just end this session and continue to this next one. Okay, thank you again for coming up. Okay, let's welcome our third speaker of this session, Professor Qiulin Chuan from National University of Singapore. Please.
Thank you. I used to be with NUS until 3 years ago, but now I'm so sorry. I was with NUS, but that's fine. Yeah, yeah. I'm from NTU, from the Wee Kim Wee School of Communication and Information, and I started to look at internet and society from 1995. So it's 30 years. I started by doing interviews with entrepreneurs, technologists, investors in China's Silicon Valley. Back then, it was called Zhongguancun, right, in Beijing. And I was still a student, but in the last 20 years or so, I focused mostly on the working people, on how factory workers use digital media, use Web 1 and then Web 2. That's how I got started. So I'm not, I don't want to even pretend to be an artist, okay? Or if you have to force me to talk to artists, I will tell them I make art with workers, with the blue color, with a gray color. Okay, gray color are people who test the software. You know, we say they are the 997, the overworked, okay, working class of across Asia. And since then, I have been looking at different types of formations. Right now, I have a project that is, our paper is now under review. Fingers crossed, it will not be rejected. It's about how the world's first large-scale predictive AI system called Igloo White It was a system used by the US Air Force during the Vietnam War. Right? So the US Air Force actually spent $1 billion every year from 1969 to 1973. So $4 billion were spent and wasted. But our team, we went through the Vietnamese archive to show how this system was defeated, right, by the Northern Vietnam force. To talk about, I think that could be a very good example for what interlabor is, to defeat intercapital. Right? And another project that we're doing right now, I call it a decolonial computing project, is looking at AI camera phone optimization and darker skin tones. Right now, as we speak, my team is conducting focus group in Jakarta this afternoon. But they will be going to Manila in 2 days. So what exactly is interlabor to me? Right? I know I try to decode, okay, the very deep, very profound, program, and I still think it's still very wide for our interpretation. And so for me, it reminds me, I think there are many ways to talk about interlabor as interrelations among different groups of labor, right? And we always, in labor studies, okay, we always talk about there's a labor aristocracy from the global north. Singapore is now part of this global north, and the relation and the majority world, okay, the working class people, okay, Singapore is one small red dot in the ocean of Southeast Asia, right? These are most of the lower class, right? They are, how are the front line? It's not, when we talk about the digital, right? In Asia, we have to remember the digital is not just the immaterial. It's not just the software, the code, the content. It's the hardware that you now hold in your hand. All your phones, your laptops, this screen, okay, this projector, these digital objects are made in Asia. Used to be almost exclusively by Chinese factory workers, but now in Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, and some of the components, high-value ones, are made in Singapore as well. So 7 years ago, I wrote an article for, it's called Sage Handbook of Social Media. So we're talking about Web 2, right? Social media is Web 2. Now, I still think that framework I discussed is an article called Labor and Social Media, the exploitation of bracket almost everyone. Okay, that's the chapter title. And in that chapter, I proposed a typology, a 2x2 typology. And I'm revisiting. I want to thank Shike and Barry and Scott. So this is my slide. Sorry I got in late because I was running from another event. And so this is, I don't know, okay. So basically there are 4 things, and you can see these 4 things as my 4 limbs, right? So first type of labor, this is the first type of labor, okay, my left foot. It's called natural labor. Labor, if you look at the English language, when a mother gives birth, that's called labor. Doesn't have to be a human mother, by the way, animal mother. So it's a natural process of reproducing the next laboring body, right? And this is a process full of pain while you make new life. So it's, there are lots of friction, right? And that's a natural state when labor got reproduced, right? And after that, we have the second type. All right, so this is my second type of labor. It's called wage labor. Right? Sometimes people think, physical labor or intellectual labor is too hard. Right? So I want to have a surrogate mother, all right, for my labor product. So I hire people, we pay them so that they do the painful work. And of course, wage labor it's not very natural. Why certain people are more resourceful? Because they're kings and queens, right? Because their last name is Trump, all right? So they have more control over the labor process, and some people have the right, the power to make use and make profits from other people's labor. So that's called wage labor. These two, my 2 feet now, are in the pre-digital age. We have these two forms for a long period of time. The third type of labor, so this is my third type of labor, is called free labor. How many of you read the Tarantino work, article from 1999, right? So that's the, in internet age, we can fool people. Capitalists can fool people to say, you can have fun, you can play, while I make use of your data. Right? I make use of your social networks. I make use, while you enjoy your playground, you are actually in my factory workshop. Right, so that's the third type of labor. And guess what is this type of labor? My left hand here, up here, that's the labor in struggle. Right? San Francisco was a birthplace of many types of labor in struggle. Right? And Singapore too, we have our labor in struggle at the beginning of the nation states, although gradually, we have our own institutionalized way to deal with called achievements, passing one of the world's most progressive and effective labor law for gig workers. It's called the Platform Workers Law, Platform Worker Act that requires all platform companies to pay pension, for gig workers, food delivery, ride-hailing workers, in Singapore, and so we have these 4 types. So for me, interlabor means the interaction between these 4 types. Right? And not just, of course, just now present this from here to here. There's a historical process from the pre-digital to the current post-digital, or post-human, post-internet age. But then there are, if you look at this type of, from here, from the natural labor to the free labor, that's actually a dimension that would remind us, if you still remember Richard Bodigan's poetry, right? Computer machine, but actually the cybernetic dream, when our human can be together, with other animal species to enjoy our, and this is a world while the free labor depicts a kind of quote-unquote friction-free, economy, but then that can also be, but I want to put it in a quotation mark, a kind of harmonized interlabor relationship, right, between these 2 of my limbs, right? But then on the other hand, if we look at the other set of my limbs, actually that's I'm going to sell my book now, all right? That's a book I wrote called Goodbye I Slave. So when the wage labor, if you go back to Marx, was still under a normal market condition. When certain people want to sell, and if the factory owners are not paying enough, or the working condition is too hard, then the factory workers can have the freedom to go to another factory. But if you look at just now, Shike's slide, talk about the scan factories in Cambodia or in Myanmar, you cannot leave. That's slavery, in the digital era. Digital era actually brings back slavery, which was the argument I made in my 2016 book called Goodbye I Slave. Right? But when you have slavery, so you have slavery, so the wage labor condition become really, horrible beyond the normal market condition, become abnormal market condition that actually creates more labor in struggle. So there's another dimension here with these 2 of my limbs, right? And that is the abolition movements. I think some of our cathedral projects, can be another way to uplift our, our labor in struggle beyond the normal conditions, right? But don't forget, the cathedral metaphor also remind me of Eric Raymond's, the software engineers, about cathedral and the bazaar. He represented these 2 as if they are the bazaar, or the deteriorating conditions as the opposite. But I would say today, with Web3, there are possibilities to construct the bazaar and the cathedral in relation to each other. By the way, labor struggle does not just, if you study labor music, labor movement music, like the story of the song, Solidarity Forever, okay, it started as a slavery abolition song during the American Civil War, but then the socialist countries tried to hijack it, but then you get other, life worlds. So basically, I think no matter using this limb or the other limb, we have to remember, okay, so there's a line in my middle, which is an old line, is that these two are the non-capitalist ways for us to imagine and institutionalize Web3. Right? Web3 have to draw on natural labor and also extend labor in struggle. Okay, and these are I would call this side, okay, the leftist side. Okay, there's a reason we call it the left wing or lefties, right? So these are the non-capitalists. You can call it socialist or anarchist. You can call it feminist or ecological, or I prefer just call all of them decolonial, right? While there are, the colonial, the capitalists, the slavery on the other side, there's a lot of attention. If you have a balanced imagination and understanding of Web3, we need both these limbs and these limbs to have a comprehensive understanding of Web3 and the possibilities. Thank you.
Apologize for the. It's okay. Oh yeah. So any questions from the audience? Anyone want to?
And thanks for the talk, Professor Chu. So I have a naive question because I'm from the tech community. Can you elaborate a bit on when you say the labor in struggle, what exactly are you referring to? What particular group of, yeah?
Okay, I have an article called Social Media on the Picket Line. So there's a whole typology. There are traditional factory workers. There are more middle class, but now you can say 997, the programmers. So there are different types of labor in struggle. And very importantly, they're not just in Asia. Okay, we have to see the labor in struggle as globally interconnected. So I forgot to mention, if you buy that book I mentioned, Goodbye I Slave, you'll find more specific example of labor NGOs being involved across borders, right? And if you buy that book, every dollar I earn as a proceeding from the book will go to Congo to support the workers' radio in the Democratic Republic of Congo, right? So that's also a way to about this inter-labor practices,
Any other questions from the audience? Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. If we already know that we are slaves like today, so what can we do? Like, we are slave and be happy?
The second half of my book, so oftentimes people say, oh, you have the I Slave book, you wrote the I Slave book. I said, no, I didn't write the I Slave book. I wrote the Goodbye book, right? So there are so many things we can learn from, especially in Asia, from the transatlantic slavery abolition movements, which by my account started in the 1780s, okay? And then after the American Civil War, of course, it's ended. If you look at the power disparity between the slave owners and the slaves, okay, in the late 18th century, today's slaves are much more empowered, okay, than those slaves, in the late 1800s. And actually, that book also shows you how art, not elite art, but popular art. What pin do you want to wear in the English high society for ladies to go to afternoon tea, right? Actually, those design items in the porcelain, in the embroidery, actually mattered a lot during that period of time. Yeah, so they are. So the short answer is today's slaves are more empowered in a way, and also the slave owners, the slave owners today are more vulnerable, okay, than those slave empires more than 200 years ago. If they could succeed, I think there's a chance now.
We have time for another question. So, any questions? Okay. If not, okay. Let's end this session then. Thank you so much again for coming, for sharing. Okay. I think we might have. Yeah, we might have time for like maybe 3 minutes break. So, okay. 你不要主持吗？对吧？我们有吗？休息时间？到多久 ？Okay.
Your tea break.
Okay. We do have a tea break. Let's continue at 3:45 then. So 13 minutes. 有 tea break， 那我们有 tea 和 coffee 在。但是上面有厕所，中午没有厕所，可能是 review， 有可能是 review。不确定，我去看一下。
45分结束提前了。
我知道，所以我是45分才开的。
但是那个 panel 是敏涵主任，他不主持。
对，他不主持。
那就没事，因为。
买书了，对，马上。
所以你会捐1块钱
给
刚果的工人电台。
不仅念了54年书，厉害。什么？什么？哦。
我跟摄影师说他们是老朋友了，然后摄影师说他算新领事会。那你也去？你没有瓜子脸。
我找一个，我看不到怎么回事，感觉有点，对，
就突然神游了，
也没有神游，就是没有，
还是害怕。
厉害了。
你有时间吗？拍张照。师兄，你有时间吗？拍张照，在门口。我们对几个。这里还有复旦的校友。
来。
那个背景板。对，小哥。
这
哦，真的。背景还没出现。什么？背景。背景。哎，那儿。应该是在最后一刻。你们这有提前哎？啊？提前啊？没有。下一场是4点半。刚刚说3点。我们在提前哦，因为那个参加的时候有车，然后就在今天6点啊。 Okay, there we go.
Title. So cracked everything.
Now, so it could be my computer as well. It's a bit. Yeah.
Do you contain any of the fonts or audio, videos?
It's PDF. No, so
it's PDF.
Yeah, yeah. So it's all good. Okay, yeah. I think that's it.
Interesting. Check it. Thanks. Perfect.
Thank you.
And now, what else do you do you have a studio?
I don't want audio.
Just audio?
No audio.
No audio?
Just visuals.
Oh, just visuals.
Yeah.
Do you want to dim the lights? Or? We can.
哎，
我第一页 PPT 是那个 title。 忙的一逼啊 ！Old school。我们是都后天回去吗？你也是后天吗？还是怎么样？
我改了票，明天，因为我那边有点事儿处理。对。
你是昨天到，明天走？
对，我本来是后天走，但是
临时有事儿。
对，回去再碰吧。
被碰到。我是 moderator。我来 moderator。刘易斯把责任交给我。
因为我们这样就是那个
对面消失了。因为他在那个他去看展，他去 National Gallery。
工作他们接了。
来，都可以做工作。Okay, it's 4 p.m. and I just took over the job as the moderator of the second session, the second part of this panel this afternoon, which is titled Recomposition of the Social. And there will be 3 presenters. The first one is Professor Huang Sun-Quan, who is the director of Institute of Network Society and the co-organizer of this whole event, the main organizer of this whole event, and the title or the theme of this talk is The Social in Decentraland Plot the Next Future. Welcome.
Thank you. Good. Okay, good afternoon. Okay, and go to, oh, sorry. Okay. Today I want to share the project I worked on 4 years ago. One that I believe carries even more meaningful when presented today in this conference. Perhaps that's what we call the power of history. And let me begin with a question like, what happened when a land shaped by 1,000 years of agrarian culture begins to say farewell to the very soil that formed its identity? So we'll start from this one. And that question is not a hypothetical question. It is a transformation now unfolding across China, a transformation that is reshaping the civilization that has deepened on the land for millennia. So I curate an exhibition called Plot the Soil. It comes from the 费孝通非常有名的一个书叫 From the Soil. So I just changed the name from the Plot the Soil. And our current argument is supposed that we did invite a lot of architecture, artists, curator together. We discuss the new rural China. And our central argument was that rural and urban are not opposite, but continue a weaving fabric of the mutual dependency. So we can see a very clear 3 steps or 3 processes that will all affect in modern China. One is called that we call industrialization from the 1956, and the second process began from the the 改革开放 open reform, like since urbanization, and then we have the informatization. The 3 processes that were decided what can you feel in today. And after China complete its national poverty alleviation campaign, every village, every household become reachable by a paved road. And any rural home can receive deliveries from an e-commerce platform like Taobao or something. And every corner of the countryside is fully connected by the mobile networks. This is what Marx said, the last mile. it represents one of the most remarkable achievements in China's process of informatization. We see another, something like that. Yeah. Of course, it's made by AI. And this has fundamentally transformed everyday life in the rural China. In other words, we are witnessing the end of 1,000 years agrarian civilization, and everyone living on the Chinese soil is part of the bittersweet transition. And that's exactly what motivated, is what I to curate the exhibition, and later to experiment with the metaverse as a way to safeguard the vanishing places of China. This exhibition is just like an open book. So we studied like 36 villages, 12 rural thinkers actually, and over 140,000 words. And we made a permanent digital archive. You can still serve all the field documentation. And most importantly, I will share the story with the Beibei. It's a city, it's a very small city near Chongqing. And he is the first modern city in China. If you know the history, like in 1930s, Lu Zhuofu, maybe you can heard his name, it's very famous. Lu Zhuofu, he owned a private shipping company. That shipping company relocated more than 100,000 refugees and resources here during the war against Japan. And Beibei became a haven for the intellectuals like Liang Suming, Tao Xinzi, Yan Yangchu, and also Lao Se. 他写了就是三代同堂那个很有名的书，四代同堂 ，sorry, bad Chinese. 4 generations under one roof, same place. It's Beibei, and you can see it's very old Beibei and new Beibei. Actually, Lu Zhuofu, he invited a Danish architect called Joseph Schwartz to plan the town, creating China's first civic park, first modern public library, and a new educational center. You can see some photo on this. It's the first one public swimming pool in 1930s. And it's more like a civic center, now it's a national science museum, but at that time it's just like a civic center. Because Lu Zhuofu is want to create a group life. It's more civilization, not so individualized society. So it do a lot of things here. And then one day, they have many buildings have seen be altered or erased. So they rise to the core question. So I made a project called Archverse. How do we preserve not just buildings, but the memory, relations, and social words embedded with them? So at one point, I met one of major land owners in Decentraland. I don't know, do you know the Decentraland? It's web-based blockchain universe, metaverse. Back then, Decentraland was extremely expensive. Almost only tech companies or gaming companies could afford to buy parcels and build their virtual headquarters. And yet, it sounds very strange. In the digital space, they should be infinitely large, right? But land in Decentraland is still divided and sold as it were scale. But this is the logic of the Web3 and blockchain. Excellent for the exchange and speculation, but not necessary for production or for building social relations. Anyway, the land owner, now a good friend of mine, believe in the value of our research. So he offers a parcel of the land. So we decided to begin with the Beibei project in the Decentraland. So first we do like remodel the old picture to the 3D models and go to the Blender and go to the blockchains based in this Decentraland. So we do a lot of things. And in the first blueprint in my mind, we will build like every brick can be tokenized or can be, NFTs, right? So maybe when we finish the model, and we can collect some money to go back to the Beibei for the villagers. That's the first blueprint in my mind. So decentralized, more like DIYs or coders group. They help us to construct the one-to-one, almost one-to-one digital model of the Beibei Old Town on the Decentraland. So we do a lot of things like this. To do a lot of workers to do for that. It's very famous Qingyangting. It's like the pavilion has the Zhou Enlai has been there, so we do this. Okay, do you remember the civic center, like the first graph, let's photograph in that. And in Ruzuofu vision, Beibei should cultivate civic consciousness and shared modern life. So in our metaverse vision, we add a DJ station, stream interviews with the present day, Beibei residents, and so visitors can hear voices from the both and present. Like we almost build a plan on it, and you can have a car. And we put the whole exhibition into the Decentraland. So, yeah, we actually have the real physical exhibition, but we bring the exhibition to the Decentraland here. It's our suggestion. So we do a lot, and a lot of people here. Okay, that's what I call. We interview a lot of residents here of Beibei right now, and we just record his song, and we collect a lot of 1930 to 50 songs. So you can go into the Decentraland and you touch the black venue, so they can play the interview song or the old songs in that period of time. So to me, the metaverse is not merely a technological or spectacle. It can be an archive in motion, like a chance to preserve history through buildings, sound, voice, and memory. Various visitors can fly about the town on a hovering plan, an impossible perspective even in real life. This is power of network to tell stories of past, present, and future in a single, non-linear environment. It creates what I call figurative history, a second life of history. Okay, I will show you two very short clips to describe this. The first one is a recruitment video created when we are calling for the volunteers. In the last, more than 30 volunteers joined us to build architectural models. Without them, this project simply won't exist. The second clip was when we finished the whole town modeling. We hosted an online experimental music night inside the Decentraland because everything had to run on a web-based computational framework. So the scenes look like playful, like toy-like. But that's the charm. It shows both the limits of playful and the creativity that emerge within those limits. So we'll show these two films. I think this is, okay. Oh, with some like, we put a lot of exhibition in the Decentraland. And we even can the online meeting in a virtual Decentraland. It's up here. And we just like the old, in the south of China, we have the temple, have the plaza before the temple. We have the theater, right? Theater stage. So we mean we copy the form of the stage on the temple. Oh, sorry, in front of the temple. Okay, this baby. Okay, we can see this maybe.
在虚拟世界中释放无限的电子浪漫吧，让未来和过去与当下发生互动。
液态的历史将在此发生。
美丽新世界，
想象改变世界，想着改变世界，
超越无限，
时间不会在这里流逝。
在此公开招募元宇宙搭建志愿者，加入我们，成就自己的未来生活。
Okay, this short one and this is a long one. Can you help me to take the video? Okay. Okay, close that. Yeah, we design tag. When you touch people, you have a bubble. We build, actually we have two cities. One is a daytime cities. It's a very old town in Beibei. And we have a night city. It's focused on the North Hot Spring Park. So when you enter the Decentraland in the night, you will see the North Spring Park. And when you enter the day in the Decentraland, you will see the old town. Because the land is very expensive, so we designed two layers on the same parcels of the land. 不要看这个。Okay, just a short, very short clip. So many volunteers. Okay, and then I want to put a very more theoretical for an end. And the idea of the second life allows us to focus on histories often excluded from official narratives. Let's bring to the James C. Scott, the concept of the info-politics, the hidden politics of everyday life, the small gesture and struggles never written into history books. And another one is, like Professor Sicker said, Foucault, in his less known essay called Infamous Life, he wrote, "The people become visible only when a beam of light cuts through the darkness, usually a light coming from power." So our project, like archverse or artists, try to generate a different beam of light, one directed toward forgotten lives, collective memories, and space in between, by mapping Beibei, the physical and cultural landscape in the metaverse. We can make these hidden histories perceptible. And for the multitude and for the marginalized, visibility always requires illumination, right? By transforming Decentraland techno-optimist real estate logic into a living archive, we can call it redirect the light. And in the closing words, I just say something personal. The many companies know that we are working on a very long research project called Triology on Culture and Technology. It explores the cultural and social condition behind the major technique developments. The first film, San Francisco, Personal Computing and Counterculture, premiered actually in Taiwan and Shanghai already. Some of you saw it around our annual conference of Network Society. The second film, The War Factory, Shenzhen, a city of innovative realism, pre-med in Taiwan as well, but tracing the convergence of the supply chains, labor, and innovation. The third film, called Silicon Island, Taiwan and the Liberal Lifeline, is now in production. I hope to share all 3 films with you maybe in the near future. You know, I'm not a technique guy. I'm not a technological optimist. But I also do not believe in avoiding technology will work, right? Technology brings opportunities and avoidable collateral damage. The question is how we understand and respond to it. As we talk about the AI, blockchain, Web3, and new infrastructures, I hope we can bring more like STS or SCOT or ANT into the discussion, reminding us that technology is never neutral. And above all, we need more attention to the history, politics, labor, culture, and the everyday life. Because the world is too easily forgotten beneath the glamour of innovation. Actually, if time allowed, I really like to share the trailer of our second film, like Shenzhen. But I don't know I have time. Do I have time? Yes. So maybe only 7 minutes, like the trailer. So I just share with you our second films. But I believe it shows something crucial behind every glamorously technology myth. There are always workers, and workers. What looks like seamless innovation is actually built from a layer of human effort and constant negotiations between people and machines. This today I want to share. Thank you. So we can go to the film.
Chinese manufacturing looks like a myth that transcends modernity. This myth often gives the first impression that, especially in the case of its protagonist, Shenzhen, it's a tale of hardworking, low-paid laborers amidst densely packed industries and factories with severe exploitation, showcasing the survival struggles of migrant workers fighting for their livelihoods. This city, which produces 83% of the world's mobile phones, is home to flagship Chinese companies like Xiaomi, Lenovo, and DJI. First-class Taiwanese OEM factories such as Foxconn, TSMC, and Giant. In Huatianbei, a dream market that can satisfy all your needs from design to production, from international trade to personal electronics consumption. It's a constellation of price, diversity, and flexibility of assembly. The World Factory not only provides the necessary products for the world, but also everything it needs for itself. Local hardware startups in Shenzhen are like kids in a candy store, freely experimenting and creating at low costs. The average resident age in this dynamic constellation is 32.5 years old, making it the youngest city in all of China. Over the past 45 years, It has served as the main engine for China's unique form of capitalism, propelling both China and the ICT industry into indispensable roles in the global economy, contributing 15% of global export capacity, second only to the United States. Shenzhen has transformed from a small fishing village of 12,000 people into a metropolis of 17.79 million people. The metropolitan areas of southern and coastal China have pushed the country's GDP from $149.5 billion in 1978 to $12.24 trillion by 2017, an increase of 82 times. Although growth has slowed since then, it still reached 17.8 trillion in 2023, representing an 18-fold increase compared to pre-reform China, with an average annual growth rate of 10% over 45 years, which is more than double the average annual growth rate of 5% in the United States. We can imagine this world factory as a forest ecosystem, which represents a unique development model from the perspective of institutional economics. Before 1978, the forest was filled with large trees, state-owned enterprises, many of which had overgrown to an unhealthy state. After Deng Xiaoping's South Tour speeches, the decision was made not to fell these large trees, but to plant new trees of various sizes in the forest. The diversity of the forest increased, with township enterprises, private businesses, foreign invested companies, along with state-owned enterprises all coexisting. The trees in this forest compete for living space and nutrients. Among them, Taiwanese enterprises grew fast and thrived with favorable environment. From 1995 to 2008, some of the large trees, like Foxconn and the shoemaker Feng Tai, stood out and grew several heads taller than their neighbors. After 2008, while there were still many robust foreign and Taiwanese transplanted trees, they no longer stood out prominently, and their importance to the overall health of the forest diminished. The global financial crisis severely impacted China's primary export markets, as well as export-oriented enterprises. The government actively nurtured domestic enterprises and promoted technology entrepreneurship policies, utilizing local government guiding funds to nourish the native large trees, while foreign and Taiwanese enterprises felt the effect of pruning their branches. This city in the global south is undergoing a transformation through the Shenzhen Bay Super Project, which aims for large-scale infrastructure construction, industrial upgrading, and public facility renovation, with hopes of achieving significant results by 2035. Before the centenary of China's founding in 2049, Shenzhen strives to become a model of global innovation city. Perhaps the era of China as the world factory has already come to an end. This state-driven version of economic development marks the age of mass entrepreneurship and mass innovation, a post-Shanghai era, and a time of the triumph of innovative realism. It is also a story of reversing the chronic poverty of the global south.
Okay, that's my share. Thank you. 来，给他们贴着。换你上去，我当着他们。
Thanks, Professor Huang Sunquan, for sharing his Web3 project, Beibei, and also the trailer of the trilogy of counterculture and focusing on Shenzhen is very inspiring and impressive. And so the next speaker will be myself. The title of my talk today, I'm an artist based in Hangzhou, and I have something printed just to make sure that I finish my talk in 30 minutes. So the sanctuary algorithm, pre-enactment, obsolescence, and the architecture of survival in the stack. So our discussion today doesn't necessarily begin on some grandiose or grand battlefield, nor it does start in a high-tech lab. It begins in a very deeply private, perhaps even awkward space on a toilet seat in a bathroom of Hotel Rus, 19th floor, Kyiv, Ukraine. Okay. What the fuck? What should I do? Okay, let's start over. Yeah. But I have like lots of videos. So should I just press or should I just? Okay, thank you. Yeah, sure, yeah. The time is 2 a.m., October 26, 2024. There's a person there, me, or rather, a datafied version of me. Above my head, there may or may not be a suicide drone hunting for a target. In my hand, I hold a smartphone, and deeply with my consciousness or programming is running, something I call the sanctuary algorithm. At this precise moment, traditional logic of survival fail us. To understand why, we must confront our first concept, the stack, as described by Benjamin Bratton. Okay. This is not working at all. Can I just like go there? Okay. I just need the next page. Does this work? This thing? No. Oh. I mean, no. I mean this HDMI cable. This. Okay. So just next page. Should I press the what? Sorry. Which button should I press?
You want to play it?
I want to go to the next page.
Here. You just play this.
Okay, this is next page, no?
Yes.
Next page, previous, and then play is
here.
Okay. Okay, now I got it. Thank you. Sorry, guys. Yeah, it works. Okay, so where was I? Yeah. So to understand why, we must confront our first core concept, the stack, as described by Benjamin Bratton, which is here. This isn't a description of cloud computing. It is a design brief for a new geopolitics. Bratton argues that the planetary scale computation has formed an accidental megastructure. It is not merely a device we use. It is a governing architecture that is actively rewriting traditional Western Farian sovereignty. The structure divides vertically into 6 layers: Earth, Cloud, City, address, interface, and user. In this megastructure, we are typically defined as users. But when a drone's sensor, the stack's interface layer, scans the exterior wall of my hotel, the city layer, and I, as a user, face an ontological crisis. We usually understand a sanctuary as a religious or physical refuge, but in computer science, sanctuary means something entirely different. It refers to a trusted execution environment and a encrypted, isolated memory area that is absolute secure, like the Sanctuary Zero Trust platform. It promises that only authorized code can run, rejecting all external interferences. However, when this algorithm of absolute security, this logic of zero trust, is forcibly applied to a flesh and blood human body, absurdity is born. In my work, Two Walls, the AI suggests that I lean my body forward by exactly 3.8 degrees and tuck my head between my knee to gain 1.0 points of metaphysical insulation index. It is a brutally precise calculation, sacrificing 0.9 points of physical comfort to mathematically invade shrapnel. But what does this algorithm ignore? It ignores my fear, it ignores my banality of my need to take a shit. It ignores the dopamine hit I got from scrolling on my phone. It ignores the physiological tremor in my hands caused by the siren. It brings us to the core question to this talk. Under the total governance of the stack, when simulation attempts to take over our lives with such violent precision, what does survival actually mean? So to answer this, we need to step back. We need to look at the foundation upon which this sanctuary is built. We cannot just look at the user layer, we must dig down to the earth layer. So in my collaboration with Filipino-American artist Mark Ramos, my longtime collaborator, this project titled Future Forecast, I constructed the stack simulator based on the current situation in the Philippines. A live simulation combined with a collective world-building game. Why the Philippines? Because it is where the contradiction of the stack are most intensified. So globally, the Philippines ranks #1 for average time spent on the internet, yet paradoxically, it also suffers from the second least stable internet in the world. Consequently, the two major telecommunication companies, PLDT and Globe, have received massive government support for infrastructure construction. But our initial research for this project focused on the intersection of the Chinese government One Belt One Road initiative and the Philippines government's Build, Build, Build initiative. So Build, Build, Build was a massive infrastructure campaign initiated by the former president Rodrigo Duterte, covering public transportation, roads, airports, dams, water resource, and information technology. These initiatives overlaps significantly, whereas like our focus is still on the internet or telecommunication infrastructures here. For instance, this company titled Dito Telecommunity is backed by China Telecom as a major shareholder. It is a typical neo-colonialist story in a Western narrative. Today, Dito Telecommunity has already become one of the most critical players in the Philippines. Another fascinating reference for this project involves a blockchain company called Cypher Alding. With government support, they plan to use blockchain and IoT, which is Internet of Things technology, to clean and re-inhabit the Pasig River ecosystem. So the Pasig River runs through the entirety of Manila and was historically vital for trade. However, due to severe pollution, it was considered ecologically dead by the early 2000s. For me, using blockchain and IoT to govern a river is incredibly interesting. On one hand, it leverages the advantages of blockchain, like transparency, to potentially prevent government's corruption. Of course, no, it's not going to happen. But it also uses token mechanism to stimulate recycling. You recycle garbage, you get tokens. And these tokens can be ideally exchanged for money. But on the other hand, this implies burying vast numbers of sensors along the riverbanks or under the water. This inevitably generates panoramic surveillances and raises future concerns regarding digital colonization. So returning to the game itself, it has like two major parts: data simulation and collective world building. So we utilize a series of open source platforms that provides real-time data from the Philippines, tracking climate change to internet infrastructure and user-related statistics. We connect these data to the virtual space via APIs to trigger real-time environmental changes in the game. For example, this was the effect driven by CO2 data from Manila in real time. And this one was effects driven by Bitcoin data, Dogecoin data, fossil fuel data from the Philippines in the real time. Or it is also connected to the day and night time cycle, which is if we play the sort of game right now, it is going to be daytime. And another part, apart from data simulation, is collective world building. So by completing a series of missions related to each layer based on our previous research, players can build and permanently change the landscape of the project. So this is a video.
Mission 1, Earth Layer. Option 1, plant a tree, which helps absorb carbon dioxide, produce oxygen, and slow down global warming and rising sea levels. Option 2, build an alienated tree-shaped signal tower. Pros, contributes to the collection of vast amounts of information related to geology and human activity. Cons, accelerating the extraction of various natural resources and surveillance. Mission 2. Crypto company Cypher Auden has partnered with the Philippine government to utilize the blockchain and IoT technology to clean the 27-kilometer-long Pasig River in Metro Manila. Option 1, clean. The Pasig River becomes clear. However, there will be more panoramic surveillance because it takes more implementation of IoT devices for real-time detection and governance. Option 2, not clean. The pollution continues to increase. Mission 3, address layer and cloud layer. Option 1, cooperate with foreign internet companies to build more data centers in the Philippines. Pros, cloud and data generate wealth. Cons, the cooling systems will produce a lot of CO2 and have huge negative impact on global warming. Option 2, cooperate with large foreign telecommunications companies to install more fiber optic cables to accelerate the development of internet infrastructure. Mission 4, city layer. Option 1, build sari-sari store, the typical local Filipino market. Pros, low operating cost and provide affordable necessity items. It also creates gathering places for local residents, which is very important in the self-circulation of the community. Cons, facility is old and is less efficient. Option 2, build futuristic architectures. Pros, in line with the Philippines Build initiative. Promote economic and overall future urban construction and development. Cons, the urban planning and development will be more exposed to the risk of being controlled and programmed. Mission 5, interface layer. Option 1, dig more mineral materials to manufacture more traditional interfaces, such as mobile phones, tablets, and computers. Option 2, manufacture more advanced augmented reality and mixed reality interfaces. Attention! Both kinds of interfaces need to excavate more mineral materials, which will increase the extraction of resources in developing countries. Mission 6.
That's the sort of like an explanatory video of this work. While there are many stories behind these missions, due to time constraints, I'll just share one. During my research, I watched a Vice documentary that offered a vivid, heartbreaking example. Because of the pandemic, many children had to take online classes. However, in the Philippines, especially in rural areas, there's no unlimited Wi-Fi. So Susana Labria, a mother of 7, was interviewed. She says she often have to face a choice between spending $2 to buy enough data for the whole family for a week or buying 2 kilograms of rice. She stated that for the most of the time, she chose the data, so her children could take online, could attend their classes or lessons. This is the reality of Stack in Global South. Surviving is now entangled with connectivity. Originally, we planned and designed a GameFi mechanism or economic system where players could earn income based on their contributions to this collective world. But due to market collapse back then, we weren't able to make it happen. But this is the mechanism that we were planning. So first, to purchase NFT characters, each representing different energy points. Second, they connect a digital wallet to verify the purchase. Third, they use those energy points to complete missions and build within the game. Fourth, future world collectively created by all players is minted to a larger NFT. Finally, the income is returned to the players in proportion to their contribution. And this is also why I put this project as ongoing. Hopefully, we could still make this mechanism happen. So to conclude, this session, focusing on a developing region, the Philippines, where the SuperStack platform has not yet been realized as a project or object of research. This project attempts to simulate a future between the virtual and the real, driven by both online and in real-world data, and to explore the impact of network infrastructure construction and development on developing countries in the context of neo-colonialism, in order to promote thinking about new infrastructure and discursive urban planning for sustainable development. But let's be clear, any development, any digital governance is always hunted by a shadow. The shadow is obsolescence. If future forecast is about the architecture of the stack, then the next project, Event Modeling, focus on its temporal dimension, specifically obsolescence, entropy, and misreading or misleading. Bernard Stiegler once warned us about the increase of entropy driven by the consumerism and digital capitalism. We produce data far faster than we understand it. Technology leads not only to the planned obsolescence of products, but also the obsolescence of human knowledge and memory. So let me provide a little bit more background about this project. So back in the autumn of 2022, a developer friend shared a new AI tool with me called Dreamfields 3D. It could generate texture 3D models directly from text. As a 3D artist that has been working with like 3D models for a long time, I was very thrilled. So for the next 81 days, I spent 6 to 8 hours a day feeding my attention to the YouTube algorithm, watching whatever news or cultural events it fits me. I then took the title of these videos and generated dozens and dozens of AI fossils. So in an era where AI technology is exploding, I attempt to record human information and generate it as fossils. Because we all know that the fossil research may have some like problems or misreadings or misleadings. For example, we know that many dinosaurs actually carries feathers, but in most of the human visualization of dinosaurs, they all comes with like very clean, smooth skin. So I then start to think, you know, when we all disappear, when only silicon-based sort of organisms, exists in the world, how can we react, or how human information is going to be recorded or misunderstood or reinvented. So this is the first part of the work. Yeah. So the interaction is pretty straightforward. You just like
Jesus taking some time off their heavenly duties and enjoy a romantic vacation in Japan.
So you just like come closer to these like AI-generated fossils.
It's often considered a privilege in China.
And then the original information
is a different story.
Of the news will pop up.
That can be transported right to the construction site.
Zhang Feifei, also known as Winnie, is China's first Afro-Chinese model to feature on Vogue China's cover story. Today, I will give you a glimpse into her life story.
People do not really want or desire happiness, and I think it's good that
I've never heard of Jesus Christ.
today. If I had $1 for every time someone asked me if Trump is coming back on this platform, Twitter would be minting money.
Yeah, this is like information.
This morning, concern over renewed clashes in Iran's universities after 2 weeks of unrest and deadly protests.
Yeah, so these are information dated back in like 2022, and just like looking at like how crazy all these like fucking 3D AI generation tool has been, advanced. But, of course, the point of this work wasn't, precision or, acceleration and so on. And then moving on to the next part, the second part of the project, which is called DUMP, pushes this entropy to extreme. It is a live simulation driven by a Twitter bot. So whenever anyone, anywhere in the world tweets a specific keyword, a corresponding 3D model dumps into the virtual scene. So for example, if someone tweets identity, a related model drops. This is a visual metaphor for the E-waves accumulating Stack's Earth layer, but it is also a critique on the cloud layer. We tend to think that the cloud is an archive of memory. It is not. It is a dump. The cloud has storage, but it does not have memory. In dump, there's no narrative, no beginning, no end. It is just an endless accumulation of the internal now. No past and no future. This brings me to Yona Friedman's concept of architecture of survival. Friedman believes in a resource-scarce future. Architecture would be improvised by users from waste and available materials. In dump, we see digital slums of the future. We live on ruins composed of expired tweets, abandoned memes, dead links, and AI hallucinations. In this sense, event modeling is not just a critique of technology, but also a scavenger aesthetics, a study of how to survive within digital ruins. So, if future forecast simulates the macro structure and the event modeling simulates the archive, my latest work, Two Walls, Ordinary War Rehearsal, returns to the micro scale, the vulnerable human body. Here, I would like to start from the contrasting concept of simulation versus rehearsal, or pre-enactment. This image on the left is from Harun Farokhi's masterpiece, Serious Games. In it, the US military used VR technology to train soldiers and treat PTSD. That simulation is clean. It is a sun with no shadow, as Farokhi said. The purpose of this simulation is to predict, control, and eliminate chance. It attempts to optimize the war into a series of operational images. And the video on the right. The video on the right, this is a scene that I was in. Yisi, can you help me lower the volume of this? Yeah. Or yeah, this is good. Thank you. Thank you. I forgot to change it. But in the video on the right, where was I? Oh, this is a scene I was in, a dark room at the Ukrainian border. An inflatable doll made in Yiwu, China, named Infinite Beauty. In this scenario, if you're a drone or an AI targeting system, what do you see? Your thermal sensors detect a heat signature of 37 degrees Celsius, thanks to a generic hand warmer stuffed inside the doll. Your computer vision matches the silhouette to a human. So, as a part of the sanctuary algorithm, you lock on and you drop a bomb. The precision-guided missile worth hundreds of thousands of dollars destroy a rubber product worth of 50 RMB. This is a failure of simulation. AI simulation is built on rational parameters, but war and human survival is full of these absurd glitches. Oliver Marchand, in analyzing the practice of art groups like public movements, proposed a concept of pre-enactment. Unlike reenactment, which replays historical events, pre-enactment is an artistic rehearsal of political events that has not yet happened. It is not about predicting the future. That's a task of simulation. Rather, it's about preparing the body for future antagonism. In Two Walls, I share many details of my experience in Kyiv. Those experiences were not hot battles. Instead, they were taking a shit with loud sirens in the background, doom-scrolling live streams, listening to a Chinese expat in Kyiv sharing his surrogacy business stories, or sitting on the train listening to a Ukrainian roommate talk about the Russian chocolate named after the former President Poroshenko. Why are these acts of resistance? Because the sanctuary algorithm wants to reduce us to data points, to targets or assets. But when we engage in the irrational, the bodily, the emotional, we declare, I'm a glitch and I cannot be computed. Let's go back or return to the core. Oh, yeah, this is a video here. Oh.
家人们，欢迎回到我的频道《战场捡漏王》。今天我们搞到了一批硬货，看看这个 AR500防弹衣，看到了吗？这上面有一系列非常漂亮的弹孔，绝对是实战中留下的。再看这个重头戏凯夫拉头盔，战场原味也带弹孔认证，普通版200刀，你看到没？这个凹坑加价50%，这都是故事，都是勋章。想象一下，把它挂在你的网咖、酒吧或者你的潮流服装店里，这叫什么？这叫调性，这叫品味。还有这个，我跟你说，是从坦克上拆下来的。别问我哪个坦克，也别问我哪个博物馆，问就是厨房用品报关，防止油溅到身上嘛。懂的都懂。这不仅是商品，这是历史的切片。投资未来就从收藏战争开始。链接我已经放在下面了。前10名下单的朋友，我再送你一包从前线捡回来的，还带着泥土的蛋壳。别犹豫，赶紧下单 ，Go Go！
Okay, let's return to the core question. In a stack, how do we build an architecture of survival? In Kyiv, my curator friend Yulia taught me the two-wall rule. Always hide behind two solid walls. The first wall takes the impact. The second stops the shrapnel. This is a static defense principle, a typical bunker architecture. But when I boarded on the train from Chisinau to Kyiv, the situation changed. The algorithm crashed. It asked me, what is a protocol when the wall itself is hurtling through the darkness at 100 kilometers per hour? Here, I realized that sanctuary can no longer be a fixed physical space, nor a closed algorithm loop. Yona Freidman said the city in the future should be mobile and improvised, built by users themselves using simple materials. In the context of digital warfare, this means our survival strategy must shift from finding cover to becoming a fluid architecture. At the end of the two walls, the AI reaches a seemingly paradoxical conclusion, reducible. Just like they were just there with their cheap rubber body, they intervened in the expensive logic of war system and short-circuited. This banal, everyday persistence is our architecture of survival in the age of stack. It is not heroic, it is entangled, it is improvisational. It is about finding the possibility of survival through constant rehearsal within the cracks of the algorithm. This echoes Francis Alley's politics of rehearsal. Rehearsal is a state of being forever in progress. It refuses to reach a final or perfect conclusion, but instead finds a mutation or potential in repetition. So to conclude, the algorithm attempts to eliminate contingency. It wants to turn the future into a closed loop, a song with no shadow. But art and our lives must embrace contingency. The works that I discussed today, future forecast, event modeling, and the two walls, are all attempting to do the same thing, to implant human contingency into the algorithm's predictive models. If the sanctuary algorithm is a program trying to lock us in a safe cage, then our task as artists, as scholars, as living human beings is to pre-enact the moments and jailbreak. We do not need a perfect sanctuary. What we need is to build temporary, perhaps even shaky shelters upon the ruins using fragments and those expired emotions. And that's a true architecture of survival. Thank you. Okay, and so thanks for letting me share. And our next speaker is artist Bani Hikao, and what the title of the talk or that he will be sharing is Artificial Intelligence, or it's worrying how anyone is optimistic at this point in time. Yeah, let's welcome Bani. And this is the
clicker.
Yeah, the clicker. Yes.
Is this microphone working? Test. Could I use this instead? So yeah, I'll probably use this. It's probably better. Okay. How long do I have? Is it half an hour? 40 minutes? Half an hour? Okay. Curse of being a musician, I like to keep time. Okay, so thank you for having me here, Prof. Huang, and also to my dear friend Amy Chung for introducing me to Prof. Huang. Wouldn't be here without both of you, both your generous invitation and having me in mind. The title of my presentation is Atrocity Intelligence, or it's worrying how anyone is optimistic at this point in time. So allow me to give a brief background of myself, as I don't usually get invited to such programs given the work that I do. As an artist, I'm largely motivated to think about, to borrow a term from Donna Haraway, the kinds of sympoetic, not symbiotic, sympoetic outcomes, or simply sympoiesis, which happens between, during, and through our interaction and relationship with machines. And by machines here, I refer to a wide range of devices, from bicycles to computers. The voice is here. I'll go through very quickly some of the works that I've done. One of the things that I do enjoy doing the most is building instruments, or rather retrofitting old things, or figuring out ways to make new instruments, tools to measure, to express, to communicate, so on and so forth. One of my more recent work is this thing called Broadcast Station by the Ruins. The joke is that the piano is no longer a piano, the piano is now a keyboard. It's a work where you write messages using the piano keys, and it encrypts messages into audio. So, and these are my two lovely friends. They are speakers which are providing output of information that's being sent out. The work in itself is a kind of strange prototype that I've been obsessing over, which is to and how else do we sort of like encrypt information within communities as a means of, you know, completely evading capture, if that's one way of putting it. You know, its precursor is another work that I did a few years back called Sifirmu. There's a lot that I could sort of like go into, but I'll skip all of that. In its previous iteration, it also had this capability of encrypting plain text into Jawi ciphertext, which is a form of writing which no longer exists within Singapore at least. It's not obsolete, like you could find it in the archives, but ultimately Jawi was the form of writing before Malay language utilized Roman script. So in this particular work, similar with what you saw in the broadcast work, is that any plain text information that's written gets encrypted into, well, in this case, into Jawi and audio. So making instruments is just something that I really enjoy doing a lot. Largely, as you can see, most of the things that I work with are things that people don't use anymore, don't need anymore. The piano is great. Like, actually, it's very easy to get a piano in Singapore. Go up Carousel. There are so many people giving away pianos for free. So you don't actually have to worry. The only thing you have to worry about is space and to move, to get people to move the thing for you. And if you don't have an elevator, you pay more for the service, so on and so forth. So yeah, things which are ultimately discarded. I'm interested in sort of like how do we sort of like have new relationships, find new ways to express, ourselves through these objects and through these instruments. And this is a current work that will be showing. Like, it actually opens tomorrow. It's called Rupa Bentuk Rangka Derhaka, which I probably wouldn't go too much into it as well. But it's a new sound work that I did utilizing my old bicycle frames, which have been cracked or broken through years of use and abuse. And as opposed to sort of like throwing them, because some of them are aluminum, there's no way for me to weld them back into piece to be utilized. They sort of like have a new afterlife afterwards, where they are now instruments. Where I cut a record with a few friends of mine. Yeah, another view of the thing. So but for this particular talk, with regards to atrocity intelligence, I do want to sort of like summarize two things as a means of establishing a kind of conceptual framework as to how I think about, the relationship or symbiosis between humans and machines. The first thing I'll speak about revolves around intimacy and how intimacy has been sort of like a useful dimension in thinking about the relationship that we have. And the other is to address this particular and peculiar title I've been thinking about for quite some time in relation to intimacy, specifically in the paradigm of how Bridle summarizes contemporary computation, which is of militarization, surveillance, and having control of and over the future, which is to say atrocity intelligence as a tool of exploitation, expansionism, ultimately an agent of colonialism. More importantly, to think about ways and means of refusing, resisting, or subverting the sensors or mechanisms which are deployed at its disposal. So I'll speak about intimacy first, to sort of lay an overarching view of this relationship between humans and machines in my perspective. Intimacy became a dimension I was interested in thinking through on the basis that some of our deepest, darkest, and most intimate secrets shared with those that we are close to are more often than not at present mediated by our phones or computers. There's a hardware and software intermediary which sits right in the middle of the relationships we have with other people. It is also clear that companies such as Google or OpenAI, major tech companies, basically ultimately have access to our exchanges. And so it is one thing to know of the companies and how they have come to be intimately knowing our bits of very private exchanges and information, and this subject of surveillance capitalism is part of this dimension that I'm thinking through. But I'm extending this inquiry a little beyond surveillance capital, specifically to consider and think through what this premise of intimacy between human, machine, and market forces do. Intimacy is a vague and ambiguous spirit. From dictionary definitions to wider critical engagement with the word, the essence of being intimate is, for lack of a better word, poetic. Laurent Ballant writes, to intimate is to communicate with the sparest of signs and gestures, which is suggestive that at the core of intimacy is something more immediate and personal and shared between two bodies or more. In some ways, I hope to talk about intimacy's biology, if you will. To think about intimacy beyond how Clementine once said, people have to share things, Joel, that's what intimacy is. I want to see where else and how else and what else it intersects and entangles itself with desire, thoughts, spirits, and failures. I want to talk about how far intimacy's soul of ambiguity has been obscured from its body. And so I begin by undressing the notion of intimacy, or its definitions as prescribed by the English language. Intimate comes from the Latin word intimare, which means to put or bring into, to impress or to make familiar. Intimare is from the word intimus, which means innermost. And here we find some semblance of what intimacy gestured towards, less about communicating and more about a process of becoming, to impress or make familiar signifies an interaction which causes a kind of change which linger or stay between two bodies. Perhaps at the root of what it means to be intimate with someone means to leave a deep impression between bodies, a kind of memory-making process where bodies lock into one another, finding each other in their innermost selves. Intimacy as a means of being close to someone or something, but don't we already know this? In Malay, the word for intimacy is an anglicized version of it, which is intim, but another word which is commonly used to address what it means to be close to someone is a word called mesra. When someone says, mesranya tu dua ekor, or those two people are very mesra, mesra here denotes a couple of things. One, it is suggested that two individuals are very close to one another, and number two, usually in the context of how it's said, it's, this example is riddled with moral judgment. Of course, this is a cultural approach to navigating what and how mesra is used to suggest the closeness of the relationship that two people have for one another. And again, we already know this. But another definition of the word mesra suggests a process of absorption, menyerap, blending, bersebati, or appropriate sebati. For all the ambiguities of intimacy in the English language, the Malay language offers a different set of poetics to frame and define intimacy, a process of absorption and blending between two or more bodies or subjects. Much like in Latin, mesra and intimare addresses a fundamental component of being in this relationship of sharing spaces, an act of transformation. To absorb and blend till it is appropriate, mesra is often used within a culinary context. So for example, in a recipe to make spicy fried tiger prawns, masukkan ke semua bahan kecuali udang dan gaul sampai mesra. Add all ingredients except prawns, mix until everything is absorbed well, denoting consistency in mixture. Now, through the Malay language, I propose that intimacy is ultimately a process of synthesis, where two bodies find themselves merging and mutating together until a new consistency or state occurs. If you're not familiar with fried tiger prawns, like the other example you could think of is making pancake batter. How different ingredients come together and a new state ultimately emerges. Which is to say, mesra or intimacy is a process of transformation. It is not just about closeness. It is not just about relationships. It gestures and suggests the unwrapping, the molting of skins to unravel a new body. It is both a process of making with and being made into something else. Mesra or intimacy is less about two people or more being together, but how these people change and what then do they become. So when I think about kemesraan, or the intimate interactions we have with our machines, the market, etc., it is to think about how we have changed. What of us changed? What is in the process of transformation? What is the consistency of this new body? What becomes diluted? What is thickened or hardened? What is softened? What gets absorbed and becomes subtle notes in the background? What overpowers? And perhaps more importantly, how much waste is produced in attempts to push for change? A change in what? A change towards what? As a card-carrying Luddite, I've been largely working on reflecting and thinking about the subject of autonomy, refusals, and care through direct action such as tactical urbanism, community-led infrastructure that extends beyond or bypasses the force kemesraan by big tech. What tools, instruments, and infrastructure can be worked on together to nurture other dimensions, to communicate, to express solidarity, and safeguard the production of knowledge away from this thing I'm identifying as atrocity intelligence. Atrocity intelligence is just a means for me to name the enemy, a working premise or title that point towards one, intelligence as is being discussed, marketed, and sold is more central intelligence agency or surveillance than intelligence as in acquiring and applying knowledge or skills, and that B, violence embedded or baked into algorithmic tools conceived by big tech are more often than not they omit or are veiled in a manner which validates their continued development and usage. Atrocity intelligence is when precarious labor such as delivery riders are exploited. Atrocity intelligence is when hiring processes are automated by problematic machines invested to rank openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism differently when someone has a bookshelf in their background or based on their skin complexion. It is also when neo-colonial wars and the military-industrial complex complex are built upon these tools which are being used or tested, for instance, in Palestine, where an ongoing genocide is still happening in Gaza. Atrocity intelligence is when the hype is so real that someone from an exploitative music streaming platform will invest millions of dollars to invest in AI drone defenses. Atrocity intelligence is when corporations rely on states to spend taxpayers' money to bail them out when things come crashing down. Atrocity intelligence is the artificial womb of imperialism, where behavior, truth, and legitimacy are birthed through models of colonial logics. Atrocity intelligence is at the forefront of futurists who advance and glorify the so-called network state. Futurists who have grayscale fascism, occupying and operating out of a hotel and calling it a school to nurture a future generation of atrocity intelligentsia. Futurists, fascists, honestly, two sides of the same coin. Where before I have spoken about Masra, now I want to talk about the gravest F word known to humanity, and why through the Malay language we can find another way to think through this conception of time, or more importantly, how we think about time that has yet to arrive. The F word that everyone has been talking about is more than just a trend. From ads, films, and policy making, the future is here to stay. But what exactly is the future? Experts have posited and plotted out numerous trajectories of the future, from speculating on the singularity to the spuriously sparked paradigms of technologies, nations, and cities. The future is an endless regurgitation of the same oppression we see today. The future is an endless regurgitation of the same violence that we encounter today. With many obscure details that seem conveniently discarded at the interest of security, prosperity, and hegemony, it is exhausting to be told to look beyond the present, that our realities will be defined by how we yearn for this so-called future. But what is the point of dreaming, thinking, hoping about the future when all your dreams are colonized by those with power? Go stan sikit, go stan sikit, go stan sikit. And so what is this future? From mainstream news to conferences to exhibitions, strategies and conversations surrounding the future revolves around the romantic idea of dreaming, to dream about a better future. But this implies that we're all sleepwalking, snoring through the horrors of the present. To be tasked to dream of the future is to be sleep-induced and defer attention from what's before us right now. To avert our eyes from the violence of today, the atrocities we are told to drift to bed with, the lies we drool over, constantly being told not to fear the monsters hiding underneath our bed. When we think of the binaries, utopian and dystopian versions of the future, a fair amount of optics is at hand. For even the present presently happens to be utopian for the 1% and the dystopian for the rest of us. The optimism would not bring us closer towards utopianism, granted the very small percentage of people that orchestrated the machine and paradigm we presently live in are nestled in their private utopias, yet the rest of us, mired and bogged by the waste and residues of this cultivated haven built on exploitation by the elites. If optimism is the basis of sheer terror, we need indeed a new paradigm that helps us reorientate our strategies, means of navigating an ever-apocalyptic tragedy in the so-called future. The counterpoint to this aharmonic paradigm is pessimism, and I am a reluctant pessimist. I'm a reluctant pessimist because of intelligence with some semblance of resignation, because people never cease to plunder the vulnerable. The only thing I can offer and propose is for us to laugh at the atrocity and pray we don't disappear in our sleep, dreaming of this future. Tapi kalau dah takdir nasib badan, the word future does not exist in the Malay language. The word future does not exist in the Malay language. The word future does not exist. And I want to say this is good. This is good because the future is often peddled by billionaires, government elites, scholars, ivory towers, solihs and solihah that berdakwah to so many of us to dream, imagine and speculate about the future of our own liking, to be optimistic about it, where we are tasked to dream for the sort of joys we don't encounter today, dream for a habitable tomorrow, think positive dreams for an inclusive tomorrow, dreams planted by bureaucrats, privileged poets who cosplay as curators, insensitive sterile assemblages of futurity, harvested, domesticated and scrapbook for portfolios, CVs and inflated egos of authority. Sila pulang ke rahmatullah. Astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah. But truly, who benefits from these dreams that the underprivileged maps out? Unknowingly plotting out pathways for generational wealth to remain undistributed, the future has replaced freedom in the race against time to determine which superpower defines what lies ahead. We're all on borrowed time by those who decided they own it. The future is banana money printed by colonizers, and we are made to buy our dreams with it. And so I am glad that the word future does not exist, because I can stop pretending, dreaming that the present is habitable, welcoming, and all-inclusive dwelling even for those who don't have a decent roof over their head. There is nothing to be optimistic about. The room is burning, it isn't fine, and billionaire sickos.jpg are looking in with a rocket headed to Mars. Really, who gets to live in this future? The word future does not exist in the Malay language, but there is a phrase conceived to illustrate it, masa depan, or time ahead, where the concept of ahead does not necessarily mean forward as in relation to time, moving forward or backwards as time travelers often do. No, ahead translated from depan, shortened from the word hadapan. Translated from the word hadapan also implies that what we are facing, encountering, regardless of linearity, masa depan is about the time we will be facing. And so the question about the future is never about when, it is about what and where. Time ahead or the future is about what we will inevitably face. Yet in the Malay language, we have a specific word conceived for the day after tomorrow, which is the word lusa, literally indicating the day after tomorrow. And quite often when you make plans for lusa, one must always say, inshallah, inshallah. Sadly, that's all the small, unexpected joys that you're getting today. For every atom holding together this statement is forged by the fires of pessimism. I am tired of being optimistic, planting sights and ambitions towards a future already built for the privileged, free ports consisting of dank memes, LARPing as artworks, money laundering accelerated in the name of crypto, decentralization, the new veil for libertarian-style democracy. This is capitalism undead. The invisible zombie hand is looking to be bitten, to infect, to disrupt, to decay the present into a cesspool of financialization on steroids. To be optimistic of time ahead at the rate we live in is foolish unless you want the world to burn. In Nusantara pessimism, it tells us that there is no such thing as the future, only a prolonged, extended horror of the present. That to be optimistic is only of what comes after today, nothing beyond. And here we find the bleakness, the pessimist reality of tomorrow summed up only by what we can manage for the day after, what we can afford to face. Where that will bring us is an unknown, uncertain of what we will face, where we will be facing. Pessimism here is to deny a manifestation of the future, but living and unraveling in the extended and untimed present. To also find ways to dismantle what we could potentially face. If anything, Nusantara pessimism is about the slow process of disarming, demolishing, internally and externally, the process of a future being constructed in other time, in other language that's set to colonize those that willingly or unwillingly refrain from participation, a currency we are forced to use with questions remaining unanswered. What are we facing in time ahead? How do we refuse and ensure non-compliance, non-participation doesn't further marginalize? What is the value of our dreams? Do we really need hope for time ahead? What are we accelerating towards, and can pessimism slow it down? Inshallah, inshallah. The word future does not exist in the Malay language, and I want to say this is good. This is good that the word future does not exist in the Malay language. It does not exist. It needed to be conjured. The future needed to be conjured in the Malay language. The future needed to be conjured. It is made up. It is fake. It is fabricated. It is spell casted into existence. The future is fiction for colonizers, elites, those who can afford the means to plot out the biggest scam in the history of humanity. The future is a construct for submission. The future is a construct for subservience. The future is a construct for control. The future is a construct for order. The future is a construct for dreams to be plundered. The future is a lie. The future needs to die. The future is a lie. The future needs to die. In Nusantara pessimism, the future is dead. Salam Masras. To close my presentation, I'll end with a brief epilogue on the heart of this struggle. Colonialism is still breathing. It hides between tongues, determined to polish its presence when conjured to the public through media platforms who become PR machines for the occupation forces. They say Palestinians died, they are not killed. Strikes happen, yet the aggressors do not have a name. There are tens of thousands of casualties, but don't trust the numbers. It's a catastrophe, as if genocide were a natural disaster. Colonialism is still infecting, the kind of infection that will have you wondering if the bug is a symptom or part of the design. It attacks the largest organ hiding underneath the skin of people you think will get you. Skin folk who will skin themselves alive in hopes that their sacrifice will grant them acceptance into the colonial halls of shame. Who skin graft whiteness to themselves will say a million things to excuse conquest, but change their story once empire expires. Until then, they'll regurgitate like ChatGPT because enslaved machines cannot understand. They do nothing but pretend, pretend, pretend. Colonialism is still selling the idea of freeing people who they believe are oppressed, people who should be granted freedom, but freedom is a trap engineered by colonizers to lure people into believing that you are shackled by the fictional premises of insufficiencies, inadequacies, and inabilities. Freedom, like their future, is a gimmick conjured to be marketed and sold, franchise or otherwise. They'll have you believe that you are not free until you buy this property, go to this Ivy League of impotent ideology, spit decolonial theory validated by ridiculous tuition fees, yet still be completely useless because now your career's on the line. Yes, that's right. Unknowingly, you too are thoroughly occupied. Colonialism is still breathing, still infecting, still persisting. It refuses to die, so we must assist its demise, flick switches, invoke curses, deliver death to their houses, break faces, dismantle spaces, flood places with our voices to drown their cries for mercy. Sorry, your sales pitch about liberty will be buried beneath the rubble of your property and hypocrisy. Until then, breathe like it's your last hour, because when death looms over you, there won't be a plot of land on earth that will accept your corpses to rest in peace. May your legacy burn in the flames of refusal. May your ambitions rot, left untouched, unacknowledged, undone, and may the flesh of your sins consume you in death, forever devoured and spat into ether. Thank you. I'm very popular with birthday parties, baby showers. If you ever need someone to give an excellent speech for any of these events, hit me up. Thank you.
I still need to do the job. So thanks, Bonnie, for your amazing sharing. Yeah. So I guess according to the schedule, we need a discussion, or just I guess if there's any questions to the artists who have just like shared their works, or anything that we would like to further discuss. I think it's great that if we end here, because that was such a amazing exclamation point. I haven't had such feeling in a long time during a panel. I think it's because normally it's like very like formal conversation. So that's I was like sweat like shit like here. So I think it's a perfect ending. And thanks everyone for attending. And see you next time. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, there will be the screening of Dylan's film. Make sure everyone come and check it out. Yeah. Thank you.